and welcome to a brand new video. Today we have quite an interesting new mysterious case. It's one of those stories that make you say like, I can't believe people are so crazy. But these kind of things keep happening. So today I'm going to tell you this case which many of you suggested to me. But before we start, follow me on all my social media. I have a billion social media accounts. Subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell so it lets you know when I upload a new video. Don't forget to also follow me on Twitch where we see each other very often. We play, we talk, and we do other things. Very well, without anything else to say, let's begin. The case of Diane Downs. Okay, I'm going to start talking a little bit about the person who's central in this case, who is Diane Downs. She was born on August 7 of 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona, under the name of Elizabeth Diane Frederickson. This is her maiden name. I'm going to tell you more about this later, when she gets her last name Downs, and that's how she's known until now. Her father was Wesley Linden and her mother was Willie James Frederickson. It is said that her childhood wasn't as normal as is thought on many occasions, and not similar to most people. It seemed that when she was 12 years old, her father started to abuse her. And everything happened behind closed doors. Let's say that nobody talked about that, but they presented the picture of a safe, united, and beautiful family when in reality all those things were happening inside their home. She went to the Moon Valley High School. It was her school, her high school. However, she always felt attracted to feeling or seeming older than she was. By that time in 1960, people say that she started to dress herself as she was older than she was. And she also started to feel attracted to and seek older men. In high school, she also meets a man called Steve Downs, and that's where her married last name comes from. He kind of became the love of her life. Nonetheless, she decides, her family decides to take her to a Baptist school called Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College, which was like an university but handled by all that branch of a religious Baptist school. All this happened in Orange, California. She moved from Phoenix, where she lived originally, to go there to Orange. That obviously kept her apart from her partner, from Steve, but let's say that they kept that love intact. That's what they wanted. However, eventually, the girl was expelled from this school for her bad behavior. But that behavior wasn't like she was doing badly in classes, that she didn't show up for them, or she was being rude. No, not at all. She had a promiscuous behavior towards many people, which was denounced by her classmates and professors, and she ended up expelled, which forced her to go back to Arizona with her parents. At the same time, her partner, Steve, was also enlisting for the US Navy, and he went to serve with them for a while. By 1973, both of them were in a stage of life where they could be together, so they decided to get married on the 3rd of November of that year and to start a life together as an independent couple. He was back from the Navy and she kept trying to find other ways of studying and go ahead after she was expelled from school. But there's when things start to fail a little bit. Many people also think that they were too young and they start having problems. And the biggest problems of this relationship were mainly two. One of them was the financial aspect, because of everything I've told you, and the second one was the infidelities. And I think this is a very common conception, you may think it was the husband's fault because of many beliefs we have due to this society, but this wasn't the case. Actually, all the infidelities and all the problems were on Diane's side. But let's say they kept going like that with that mute pain, so to call it, and that's when they start having their children, and they had 3 kids after the first year they were married. The first one, called Christine Ann, was born in 1974. The second of them was Cheryl Lynn, their second daughter, born in 1976. And the last one was a son called Stephen Daniel, born in 1979. What happened? Diane also became sort of a detached mother. Even in the year which her first daughter was born, Christine Anne, she decided to enlist in the Navy just as her husband had done, and she abandoned them for some months. She also tried to leave to distance herself from everything and the whole topic of infidelities. So Steve took care of their daughter. However, only 3 weeks passed until Diane came back from the Navy, basically because she said she had many injuries that they didn't take care of and that she was feeling poorly, which wasn't truth. It simply seems like she got bored of that life and decided to go back to her reality. What happened? Also before they had their last son, during that time of so many fights, things that happened, and the opinions she had, her husband Steve decided to have a vasectomy. According to Diane's version, the vasectomy didn't work, and that's when they had their third son, Stephen. However, the man knew it had worked, that the procedure was done correctly, and that there was no way that they could have had that last son. So that's when he started suspecting that his son Stephen Daniel was not really his, but the product of some other infidelity she had with other men. They kept fighting a lot. Stephen was tired of the situation and the infidelities, and also the fact that oftentimes she used those pregnancies to get what she wanted. It was like she wanted to have children for that, so people could see her differently, so they respect her a little. She wasn't really interested in taking care of her children, keep them safe and calm. Incapable of fixing everything that was happening, they decided to get a divorce in 1980. Obviously, many argued that it was a marriage done at a very young age without love, that they had many problems, and people even say that Steve was also very irresponsible, that he really liked gambling or going to casinos and stuff like that, and he was very immature to take care of his children. So I think the fault is on both sides. What weighed more when taking that decision was Diane's attitude and everything she did within the relationship. After all this happened, Diane became even more detached. She became even more negligent to their kids. Sometimes she forgot to feed them, give them studies, well, a bunch of things that they were basics. And obviously the husband didn't the ex-husband didn't have the kids' custody, so they didn't pay attention to them. What happened? For her, it became more of a priority to flirt with men, to go out with them than to take care of her own kids. By this time, she was like 25 years old, but she tried to become a surrogate mother. She wanted to rent her womb to have children because she had also heard about the money she could get in exchange for doing that. So she tried that a couple of times, but she failed because she didn't pass some psychological tests that are required for, let's say, go through with this process. Even so, at some point she was able to have a fourth child, being a surrogate mother, selling that child for $10,000. They say the daughter was called Jennifer, but after that it was unknown which was her true identity. By that time, her daughter's grandparents said that she, the oldest daughter, she started telling them that she was afraid of her own mother. Maybe that kind of negligence, that same attitude towards them, made her own kids start to say it without anyone knowing that they were afraid of her own mother. The children constantly looked malnourished, very wrecked, and even the grandparents tried to take care of them, but it wasn't the same. Often the oldest daughter was left in charge of the other siblings when they were only 5 or 6 years old. In 1981, 1 year after she officially ended her marriage, because of work, she meets a man called Robert. People call him Nick. Knickerbocker, which was his last name. I've never heard it before. But he was basically a man who helped her in work-related stuff she had in that moment. Some vacancies she had found, so he became kind of a co-worker for her. But Diane started falling profoundly in love with him. He was a knowledgeable man, and he had everything. He was very handsome. Well, a lot of things started attracting her. However, he was married, but he also, on some occasions, had some affairs with Diane. You can imagine. But in one of these affairs, he said that for him, Diane's children were like an obstacle. For he said to her, look, I don't want to have children. In my life, I don't have children. We don't have children with my wife because precisely, for me, they're like an obstacle and I'd rather not have them. So this caused Diane to be very, very sad, for she was very obsessed and in love with this man. People also say that that by this time, when she was really obsessed with him, she wrote him letters daily explaining and telling him things. They even say that she received some letters from him in which he promised her he will leave his wife for her. But later on, we will talk more about this topic because it's really important to do so. And I wanted you to know a little bit about this girl's life background so we can dive deeply into what happens in this case. It was April of 1983 and Diane got a new job in Springfield, in Oregon. It was a job as an employee for a post service office, or postal stuff. She was comfortable there but not so happy, for she had left the place where she was close to Robert, who was like her great new love and the person she was obsessed with. It came a day which was May 19 of 1983. She thought she wanted to go back to the place where Robert was, but she had to do something, like some errands, so to speak, before she could arrange the paperwork to go back. She was going to visit a friend of hers that lived in that city to talk for a while. She goes with her kids, and around 9:30 p.m. she goes back using a road that's not very crowded called Old Mohawk Road. This is a rural road which she could use to go home, but there were many cars. She decides to take that road at that hour because she thinks it's the fastest way to go home. Everything that I'm telling you, it's like her version of what happened, so we can discover step by step what happened. She said her kids were asleep, that everything was calm and in silence. She was playing music, and she even perfectly remembers the song that was playing in that moment, called Hungry Like the Wolf or something like that, which was supposedly a song that was very popular in that time. She perfectly remembers how that song was playing on the radio. Suddenly she sees that there's a man standing in the road, like asking for help. In this road where he was standing, there was like a river on one side and like a grass terrain without anything else on the other. She tries to ask, like she rolls down the window and says like, well, what do you need? But then this man points a gun at her and tells her to surrender the car, basically. He's obviously trying to rob her. She says that they begin to struggle, and in that moment she apparently steps out of the car. Keeps struggling with him so he can take the car, but the man shoots her in the left arm with quite an aim. What she does is try to throw the keys so he doesn't attack her anymore, and so he can take the car and the kids. While that's happening, she says the man gets closer from outside the car to the window and shoots every single one of the kids. She says she doesn't know where she found the strength to push the man far away from the car. Then she opens the door, steps in, and accelerates like crazy so she can get fast into the hospital. She obviously tells this so the people understand what just happened, why the kids are like that. Let's say that one of the saddest and most delicate things is that Cheryl, the middle daughter, arrives to the hospital and she's dead. She's the only one that's dead, and there's no way they can bring her back. But her siblings, her older sister has a gunshot very close to the skull, which starts to limit her, so they put her in an induced coma. Her son is obviously paralyzed from the legs down. But anyway, obviously everybody talks about it. They say, what a great tragedy. Imagine a man who's going to steal your cards and end up killing your children, well, some of your children, leaving the rest gravely injured, and yourself, where she had her arm completely injured. That was the moment when the investigation obviously started. Interviews were done. She talked again about all the facts to really understand and start looking for the culprit of this, because she said she hadn't the slightest idea of who could it be. But what happened? Some particular things started to happen, and the people began doubting about what happened that night. One of the first things that they start noticing is that the mother is not distraught. I mean, the mother is in a state she should be in complete shock, crying, not being able to process talk, I don't know, but she's completely normal. There's even a moment in when she worries more about how the card ended up. She say like, this ruined my card, instead of really think about her children. She starts giving versions in different TV shows. Interviews began being done to her because all of this were months and months of investigations. She goes to Oprah and says that there were like up 30 witnesses that day, which is not true because nobody saw that person. There's a clip also for a TV show which I think it's one of the strangest. I'm going to show it to you obviously, and it is basically when they ask her to tell her to recreate after several weeks of the tragedy happening, to recreate what happened that day. Here is like especially notorious, and people notice that she's in a very particular attitude. She's laughing, like showing off herself. There's even a moment in which she mocks herself for hitting her cast. And in other moments she says like, this is almost the same as that moment in which, and many think she was going to finish that sentence saying, shot myself. This interview, it's very particular because it's like, friend, you just lost your daughter and the other two are critical. But she's there like nothing happened, recreating, laughing, everything is very odd. There's another interview too, I'm showing it to you here, in which she even gets upset because people are doubting her.
I wouldn't walk in there and say, this weird person came up out of nowhere and shot us for no reason and just left. I mean, that's not a believable story. I could have, if I had done this, I could have come up with a believable story. It really happened.
After, when they did an exhaustive investigation of the crime scene and everything, there were some gunshots and like certain blood splatters that didn't match the version she was giving. For the attacker supposedly shot her from outside, so there shouldn't be certain blood splatter in some areas. He supposedly shot them from one side and not from the other, so there were things that were matching. At some point, she, according to the hospital's version, entered her daughter's room to see her, and she obviously couldn't talk because there was an after effect from the gunshot, but they say that the daughter's heart rate started spiking like crazy. Also, after several months and so much pressure, they obviously interrogate her more. They even submitted her to a 16-hour interrogation, the kind ones that are used to discover the truth, but she wasn't able to say anything. She simply got really upset and say some things she hadn't said before. There, she started to say that apparently she knew the person who shot her kids. And obviously the cops said like, well, if you know who he was, tell us. Tell us, because that could be a key piece of information for this investigation. And the only thing she did was get upset, much more upset. She even in that recording leaves the place.
You do know who did it?
Yes, I do. I damn sure do.
You know him by name?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
You saw him shoot your kids?
Yep.
It's pretty important.
And I saw him grab my arm and yank my arm out and shoot my arm and say, now try to get away with it. And I'm leaving because I know who did it. Bye.
The time is now 17:46, and Diane is just departed the office. We're concluding the tape.
During one investigation, she also confessed she didn't have any gun, that the culprit couldn't be her for that reason. But it was completely false, for the police ended up finding inside her home a gun that perfectly matched the one used the night of that crime. Besides, her ex-husband and her new love, who she was obsessed with, confirmed this information. They also found the letters and the diary, which were full of references and messages to Robert, her new love, about her complete obsession. She even talked about him not wanting kids and how she could make that not a problem between the both of them. There was also a very important testimony from a man who said that he saw her driving towards to the hospital that night that her kids were supposedly shot, but he said that contrary to what she had said, that she had gone full speed, he said that she was going painfully slow, that he even was behind her and his speedometer almost didn't raise because of how slow they were going. He even said that he hung and had to surpass her because she was going too slow. After that, Robert started talking as a witness to all of this, and he said that indeed that woman was starting to get obsessed with him, that even on some occasions she threatened him and his wife if she couldn't be with him. He also said that he was very glad she had moved to Oregon so he could build his home again and stay away from that tragedy. What happened? There were many proven reasons to suspect the woman, and there was how on February 28th of 1984, 9 months after the tragedy, she finally is arrested for being a prime suspect. What happened? Let's say that the easiest way they found to prove this was the following. Her daughter started waking up from the coma. Evidently, she wasn't able to speak and started a treatment with a psychiatrist and everything so she could get better. Her psychiatrist asked her for something very particular and told her to write the name of the person who attacked her that night and throw it into the fire. He told her that only when she felt ready to please hand him the piece of paper. They say this therapy lasted for some weeks or months, and she always burned the paper until one day she finally gave it to the therapist. And in the paper, the girl had written, "My mom." That's how everyone's suspicious is confirmed. Basically, Diane shot her kids that night. And I know it's terrible, friends. And well, basically, let's say that this is a very tragic case, and I'm going to tell you broadly about the conditions behind this case. Her daughter, Christine, received a gunshot that caused her a stroke, and that's why she ended up not being able to speak, among many other things. Her brother, Danny, who was 3 years old in that moment, ended up completely paralyzed from the legs down. Later on, Christine's complete recollection of what happened is revealed from Christine, who is the one who tells everything that happened that night. What really happened was that her mom, around 9:30 p.m., was driving down a very desolated road. There was absolutely nobody close by. What I told you, there was a river on one side and a great meadow, like one of those big areas in which there is practically nothing. Around 10, she suddenly stops in the middle of the road. Everybody is a little sleepy, like they don't know what's happening. She steps out, tells them she had to take something out from the car trunk, and then she opens it. That's when she takes the gun and aims at her daughter, who was the one in the front seat. The other two were obviously in a very nervous state, and one of the girls tries to get out. She's the one that gets shot twice and then shoots her son. I think that according to what I understand, the order was the daughter in the front, who was the one that died, the ones in the back, first the son, and lastly the daughter, who was the one that revealed what just happened. And I know she remembers in that moment how she saw her mother shooting herself in the arm. After, she turned on the cord again, wrapped her arm in a towel, and started going forward. As I say, the woman was indeed driving very slowly. They discovered she did that because she basically wanted her kids to die from blood loss on the way, so there wasn't any absolute chance of save them. Let's say that they basically did some tests on Diane, and thanks to that, they found that she had some early signs of psychosis. And what led her to do it. Basically, as I've told you, in the moment she was completely obsessed with a man called Robert, who had told her that she had kids, and for that reason, he didn't want to be involved, because he never wanted kids. This led the woman to a state of craziness in which she said like, well, what's the easiest thing if he doesn't want kids? Basically, get rid of my own children. And then is when she decided, and she obviously planned this beforehand, to murder them and remove them from her path to this man. Obviously, many other things proved her guilt, how she was changed her versions, the way in which she handled the situation. There's a very particular interview in which she talks a lot about this, in which she says she regretted or that she simply... There's a very shocking part in which she says she remembers how the blood flowed from her daughter's mouth. And after she says this, she simply smiles. I mean, like, she laughs and like, what a psycho woman. I mean, it's an absolutely horrific attitude in which she remembers and starts imagining her kids, but there's a trace of something that really affects her from this situation. In this interview, it is also very interesting that she talks about the case, but she starts to talk about the situation or about what she lived in her childhood. She begins telling how her father abused her, and everything is centered on her. I saw like some analysis and very interesting things, and it's like this woman ends up turning the interview in something that only has to do with her. Namely, she doesn't give importance to the kids in that moment, which is obviously speaks of a narcissistic and psychopathic personality. Obviously, after her daughter confessed what happened, she doesn't have any way of escaping, so she's captured, as I told you, on June 17 of 1984, and her sentence begins. Thanks to everything that they had, the proof, besides the blood splatter that didn't match the version, it was proven that she herself had fired and that she used her own gun, among other things. She is sentenced to serve life without the possibility of parole until after 25 years of her sentence. Among the studies that were done to the woman, they discovered a histrionic and narcissist personality. antisocial disorder, and psychopathy. She was initially on the state of Salem. She was sentenced there and they gave her life imprisonment in jail called Women's Correctional Center from Oregon. However, on July 11 of 1987, 3 years after she's been in that jail, she tries to escape by climbing a 5-meter tall barbed wire. She wore special clothes so that didn't hurt her skin or didn't harm herself. And the worst is that she'd succeed. She indeed escapes prison and at that time goes to the house of her salesmate husband, who was a man called Wayne Safer. She basically met him because of her cellmate, who told her everything about him. And she knew he lived close by, so she decided to go to his house, and the man, don't ask me why, surprisingly received her too. They say she even had sexual intercourse with him during her stay in the man's house. Obviously, this was a man who in that moment didn't have a very good life. He didn't have a job, he also was addicted to different kinds of substances and basically lived day by day. By this time, the investigators also began to think where she could be. They started to go through the things she had to try to see how she escaped, and they found among like that a map of the city she had. They tried to understand where she could have gone. I don't know if you know, but sometimes one writes on top of the other sheets of paper and leaves a mark on the bottom sheet of what was written on the one on the top. So they discovered that was happening, so they began scratching it with a pen the possible clues inside the map. And they discovered she had drawn a line to this man's house. So they say like, well, we don't know what's there, but let's investigate. And that's when they finally found Diane, who was hiding in that place. They say that when they arrived that day, she tried to take like a compressed air gun, something like that, and start threatening them with their committing suicide. However, thanks to the good work of the police, they were able to avoid the situation and make her surrender. And they captured her again. The man ended up having 5 years of parole for this situation, and she got 5 years added to her sentence for having escaped. However, with all this happened, and because eventually they didn't trust much in her, they decided to move her in 1994, 10 years after being convicted, to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. In 2010, she was moved again to the Valley State Prison for Women, also in California. They say that during her stay in prison, she obtained a degree in general studies. She supposedly had, according to the law of the conditions of her conviction, until 2009 to appeal her parole. In 2008, she started presenting this appeal. However, the crazy thing was that she continued with the same version. All the time she said that she had been attacked, that it was a man, she never changed her version since then. She keeps pleading completely innocent, and since then, her parole has been denied. They say she presented an appeal again in 2010, which was denied, and in 2020 she presented another one that was also denied, which is great because this woman is really crazy. What happened? Something really interesting happened during her conviction. As soon as she's apprehended, as you could see in the pictures, I kind of skipped this part, but I was going to mention it later. Well, basically when she's apprehended and convicted, as you could see, she was pregnant. Yes, indeed, she was pregnant with her 5th child. 3 of them were ones I told you about, the ones she tried to murder. The other one was the one she sold, and this last one, this baby whose father is unknown, the father of this girl who ended up being a girl. But almost everyone thought she got pregnant with the goal of making people see her with tenderness and make them be more patient and clearly try to be less harsh with her. She even says that on that interview, I'm also going to show you that part, which is awful and shameless, but she said that she basically misses her kid so much that she's hurting a lot, but she says she likes getting pregnant because it's very easy to conceive a child. And I think like, God, this is insane. In the end, she had the new daughter. However, I don't know how the department in charge of kids is called there. However, let's say it's child services, took the child away from her and gave her for adoption to a couple who called her Becky. They say that Becky always knew she was adopted, but her parents never told her who her mother was. Obviously, she, as she was growing up, started having that interest for knowing who her mother was, and I think I understand her. It's normal to have curiosity. They say that in that moment, she tricked the nanny she had to make her believe she knew who her mother was, obtaining her name in that way. Given that, the nanny finally told her the mother's name without knowing she didn't know it. When Becky decides to go to a library, there found a book written about Diane Downs. The book is called Small Sacrifices, and it was by an author who made her job to write absolutely everything about the case. And she finds out who her mom was. She says even that she saw a TV special about her mom, and that hit her very, very hard. What happened? Finding out about this reality made her go to the dark hole of addictions. She ended up consuming drugs during a long time, and she also got pregnant when she was 17 years old. Sometime later, she had her second son, but this time she decided to start changing the perspective she had of her mom, so to speak, and begin contacting her. But that time, she also started to realize that Diane had some really serious problems. She began talking about conspiracies, didn't accept what she had done to her brothers, told her the most odd and irrational things, and that's when Becky decided to cut completely the relationship she had with her and never contact her again. For that, she also decided to get better, obviously leave her addictions behind, and start talking more about the light about her story. Here I am showing you the images so you can see her. And I'm really glad she really decided to take another path. Obviously, you must be asking yourselves like, well, what happened to the siblings? Well, Christine and Danny, who were the ones who survived, I feel like this is very nice, but they were adopted by the judge that led the case. Well, actually is the prosecutor of Diane's case. They didn't give them to their father because you can say, well, they could have given them to him, but as you know, the father was quite immature. He was very responsible and also had many problems, so they decided not to give it to him. And the prosecutor was the one who decided to adopt them as his children. Since then, they say he has given them a calm and marvelous life in which they don't know anything else about their mom, and they can keep working on their aftermath. They say that Danny is still paralyzed, but he became an IT genius, that he's living a normal, happy, and calm life. Regarding Christine, they say she's already married and had a baby. She has also been able to regain the ability to talk. Both have had a very private life. We don't know how they look, how they are, what they are up to. And I understand them. I will also want to forget all the past and that people didn't recognize me because of that. And regarding the pop culture, there's what I've told you about the Small Sacrifices book written by Anne Rule in 1987 that tells this complete story, that even say that there's a movie with the same name started by Farrah Fawcett, which is also revolves around this case. To tell you the truth, this case is very interesting for me, also very sad, but I'm very grateful that the kid survived, because if not, I don't think they would have caught her that easily. But I find it very sad. Let's say that destiny or what they had to pay for this woman's decision, a woman who was clearly crazy, deranged, something was missing from her mind so she could rationalize better, but anyway. And in the end, at least there was actually justice. She's still in jail and it's looking very old. She's already very aged and I really don't think she's going to leave that place alive, to be honest. Well, let me know what you think about this case. If you like it a lot, remember to leave thumbs up, comment what you think about the sentence, if it was fair or not. If I missed something, please let me know in the commentaries. Remember to follow me, I have a billion social media accounts. Subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell so it lets you know when I upload a new video. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching me. Don't forget to follow your dreams and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!